Good day, I'm Dr. T, and today I'd like to look at measuring a few things. This is, a category where you're probably already familiar with these, but I want to give you a couple of, tips and tricks. And so this is going to be some fairly straightforward, just length measurements. But even there are a couple of tips and tricks to get higher quality measurements. So for starters, I'm measuring this glass stirring rod, which was actually a bit of a pain because the edges are rounded, which makes it a little harder to do. But when looking at this, first thing you'll notice is that I don't have this on the end of the ruler. I have this on a tick mark. In this case, it's the 1 centimeter mark, which that gives me the advantage of if I put it at the end, that end can be eroded, it can be damaged, and I can't really trust that where it kind of implies is 0 is actually where the 0 tick mark is, because that 0 tick mark could be gone. Now, some rulers will simply have a space after the 0 tick mark, so that, you simply put it at the 0. But with this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it at the 1 centimeter mark. And yes, this is labeled millimeters, but those tick marks, the big ones, the ones with numbers, those are actually in centimeters. The little tick marks are millimeters. I know, it's slightly confusing. But really what I'm going to do is it's on the 1, and then I'm just going to subtract 1 centimeter when I'm done. Now, let me get the camera in a little bit closer to the end of this one. And I really should not have used a flash. But when I'm looking at this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at it, and it's like, okay, this is a little bit past the 21. Now, obviously, I know that that's really 20 because I started on the 1. And I look at the tick marks, and I'm like, okay, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and there's a large one. That's kind of a counting aid. 6, 7, 8, 9, and then the next one is 10. That's numbered. Okay, so I know for this tick mark, that's going to be 21.1. Now, in reality, once again, I'm subtracting off that 1 centimeter. But if I look up, and I've looked very carefully as I bring my cursor up, and this is really hard to do, but that tip of that bulge there is a little bit past that tick mark right over here. So with that, then I'm going to say, okay, now that's not 21.1. That's a little bit over that. And typically speaking, what we're going to do is estimate one more digit past. And we don't really trust this digit a lot, but it is still measured. It's still okay data. Not great data, but okay data. So we'll use it, we'll incorporate it, but we just realize that when we're making value judgments on this, that if it's really critical on that digit, then we go get a better instrument. But we still keep it because it's still an okay number. And it's just barely past. So I would say this is 21.11. So 21 centimeters and 11 hundredths. Now, I didn't subtract off centimeters. So what I actually would write down would be 20.11 centimeters, or 201.1 millimeters, whichever I prefer. Same difference. Okay, so that's this guy. Of course, we've got other instruments, especially if we want to go a little bit more detail, a little bit more precision on this one. We might not go for a ruler, we might go something else. And especially if I want to measure like diameter, that's an absolute pain to do. So a classic one, and once again a case where I should not have used the flash, is the calipers. So calipers are going to have little claw-like things, and it's going to allow me to pinch the sides of it, and that's going to give me a really good feeling for things like diameter. In this case, I'm looking at outer diameter, or OD. It's a solid rod, so there's no internal diameter to it. And with this guy, this particular caliper that I'm using is a digital caliper, therefore you just write down the number you see. Whenever it's a digital display, you just write down the number. Very straightforward. So this would be 4.96 millimeters. I just write her down. But you don't always have digital calipers. So in this case, I have an analog caliper, and this actually has a really cool add-on that's going to help me with my estimated digit. And so right now I'm grabbing the bottom of a beaker. So I'm measuring the outer diameter of this beaker. In this case, I have an outer and an inner diameter. The inner diameter would be the inside of it, or the ID. Okay, so I'm going to get a better photo of this. I learned my lesson with the flash. And on this case, so I'm going to measure off this 0 tick mark. So I'm at those are tenths. So it's going to be 4.1 centimeters. And it's going to be a little bit past this. And I'm going like, okay, it's kind of like somewhere around halfway. But this is going to give me some help, and this is going to take this number, this estimated digit, and instead of being a little wonky, it's actually going to make it really, really good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at these tick marks, and I'm going to look at these tick marks. What I want to do is find the ones that line up, and this is one of those ingenious systems. We're long before we had digital readouts for these guys. So as I'm looking at it, what I want to do is I want to find the two tick marks that line up. So like this tick mark and that tick mark, which would be 4.5, they don't quite line up. Same goes for this one. The 4 doesn't line up. That 5 is close. But you know what? That's 6. This guy lines up nicely. So what I would say is that this is 4 centimeters point. It's past the 1, so 4.16 centimeters. And that gives me a pretty good reading. And that's my estimated digit. And the scale on the side really helps me get the estimated digit with these. By the way, calipers also fairly useful little critters, so I can do a couple other things with them. Well, it's a horrible photo, but I can use the prongs on the other side of the caliper to do ID, so the jaws do OD, or the outer diameter, and the little spiky bits do internal diameter. And you'll notice most calipers have most calipers have a little stabby bit on the bottom, and that's for measuring depth. So it's attached to the jaws. So if you were to flip the thing over, which I should have done a photo of, but if you flip it over, you'll see the little metal wire, and the other calipers has the same thing. The little metal wire is attached to the jaws and slides with them. And so that allows you to measure depth. And once again, fairly accurately, calipers are really good for measuring nice, accurate distances. So very useful ones. Typically, honestly, in chemistry, we don't measure that much length. We really measure the volume. And I've got a video on graduated cylinders that I'll direct you to for looking at those. Because for chemists, a lot of what we're doing is volume stuff. But with that said, have a wonderful day, and I will see you in later videos or in the lab.